Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Iron Needs Marketing. I am Nicky P, here as always. Today, I'm joined by author Melissa J. Cave. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
It is a Wednesday night, so I'm doing fine. It could be any other night, and I'd still probably say the same thing, but because it's a Wednesday today, we'll just say because it's today.
Yeah, we're through the worst of it.
Exactly. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from, kind of this big spiel as it would be?
Yeah, so I am, well, right now, published author as of November 1st. I currently work for the Department of Defense and I'm a military brat and veteran myself, so I am from everywhere. I've been moving for a good chunk of my life, most recently, Virginia.
My wife is also military brat and has fun stories of like Germany when she was a child. Can't give blood to this day because so now one of the things we're kind of talking about in the pre-show, and I bring this up because it is something we don't think about a lot, is we tend to think of people from the military as being not the most abstract or creative of beings. And so when you tell people you're an author in particular in the fantasy genre, and that you were a soldier, that seems weird now. Now, culturally, that's also ignoring the fact that like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and all those guys were soldiers at one point in time too. But it's I think a little different culturally now than it was at that time.
Yeah, you get the image of discipline, and so that discipline kind of crushes creativity and individuality. But really, like, one of the most important components of creativity is experience, in my opinion. Like, see the most places, know the most people, experience the most weird and diverse possible life. And that will inform writing, especially, better than just about anything else.
Well, I mean, when we look at modern TV writing, it is clear that the people doing the modern TV writing have never left Los Angeles and don't know many people other than their dog.
Yeah, and that's the advice that I give to any young writer is to go out and get a weird job. Like Louis L'Amour, their Western writer, is kind of an idol of mine, and he had the most bizarre collection of jobs you've ever seen, like going on tramp steamers around the world. And that will show up in your writing, even if you're not talking about tramp steamers. That experience will appear.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, it makes you a fascinating person to talk to, which is just inevitably going to lend to storytelling. My daughter's godfather, one of the things that, like, I always love talking about him is because he spent time as a cabbie when he was in his early 20s, and just listening to him tell stories of just that job alone, like, he had plenty of other weird ones, but, like, the people that he met just driving a cab made for some of the most interesting listening in the world.
Oh, for sure.
So I can only imagine, like, having, like, say, the having left the country, the get moving around element of, being in the service, just giving you an endless amount of stories to tell there.
Yeah, that and actually a lot of experience for storytelling now that you say that, because anytime you get a group of military people together, they're going to start telling stories about the weird stuff that happened. And when you're actively in the military, you've got a lot of standing around time to tell stories. So that refinement of the storytelling experience is definitely there.
Let's hurry up and wait, as they say.
Exactly.
Interesting. Now, out of curiosity, does that background lend in any way specifically to the fantasy element of the writing?
So, as a veteran and just sort of the military experience in general, like, there's a lot of that in fantasy, and in mine in particular. I write medieval or medieval-ish fantasy, so it's got knights, they just came out of a war. So a lot of their experience plays throughout the series. Like, I try not to, like, make a character that has PTSD, like, as their central character feature. All of them have a variety of ways of responding to what's happened to them. So that shows up, and there's a strong theme of what do you do after the war is over? And that's also kind of the central question that I ask about the series that my male character Remen is trying to answer is like, do the promises that we make during war ever survive the peace? And of course, just coming out of 20 years of war in the Middle East, like, this is a relevant question to me. But this is one way that fantasy is aspirational because he does actually try to keep his promises. It takes a lot, but he does try to keep his promises to his surviving men.
So it sounds like you're approaching it from a hopeful angle, which is not something we see a lot in modern writing in general. It's a lot of, I don't say doom porn, but
Yes. Yeah, and that was deliberate on my part. I'm tired of and I think maybe that is also a younger person's game, the grim dark stuff, like, because you don't have much experience with the actual grim, the actual dark, and so you like to get around and play with it a bit. But I think we've had enough of that. I think we've had enough of deconstructing heroes and everything is bleak and everyone is terrible and the bad guys win and oh, I'm tired of reading that. I'm tired of seeing it. And so it was a conscious decision on my part to show good people doing their best.
it's funny you mentioned that because for me, in most of my life, I've been a horror guy. That's my thing, and I still enjoy reading it and whatnot. But it definitely doesn't do for me what it did, say, in like my late teens and early 20s. It doesn't carry the same like cachet, I guess. I'm easily amused by reading like something that's actually got like a positive end of a story, and I think only because maybe because it's for so long, writing has been taken over by. I guess maybe my 20s, I've been very happy that everybody dies at the end of a story because, oh, it's maybe flipping the idea on its head, having come up with the classics. But now it's like everybody's writing the ending where everybody dies. So it's like there's nothing satisfying in that. I'd rather find like some glimmer of hope in my writing. That's the stuff that I'd rather pass down to my child. I'd say that much.
Well, and you get a big so I'll say I'm over 40 now. And so having gotten that much of a time scale, like the idea of old age is no longer as foreign to me now. And so you have your young, dramatic, violent, etc. years. But then you have to start thinking in a longer scale than that. Like what happens beyond that and planning for a longer time frame. And I think that like the nihilist stuff that's cool to a certain and popular demographic, but I think it's natural for adults to start to want more than that after a while, like just part of growing up.
I mean, at a certain point, you have to have a reason to keep going. And if you think it's all doom, then that gets pretty difficult to take on the next day. It's like, why am I doing all this if this is all it means? 20 years of that behind me, I don't need another 20 ahead of me. Interesting. Now, the kind of work you're doing right now, what is the book that you said you just put out in November? And this is your first book?
Yeah, so debut fantasy novel, Traitor Son, first book of the Empire of the Stars. And actually, I wrote the entire series before I published book 1. So I have 6 books done, which is 5 main stories and 1 side story, because I did not wanna be another George R. R. Martin. And it's like, I'm not leaving this hanging, I'm gonna have that much done.
Nobody does.
Well, and that's happened so many times.
Well, I have to ask the question, like, how do you manage that? Like, I'm a musician, and so, like, when I finish something and put the song together, like, I just want people to hear it as soon as I possibly can. I can't imagine, like, waiting on an entire album just to put out a single song for people to hear, which is essentially what you're talking about doing. How do you manage to be okay with that inside? Do you have, like, a ton of people around you that you can at least get test reads out of?
So well, I've got some, so that did help, but also it's a very tightly connected story, and so, like, n having had that luxury to write all the way through book 5 and then go back to book 1 and edit it, because I know the characters better, I know the little things that I need to sprinkle in ahead of time, I am so glad that I did. Like, it's because it's a long continuous story that builds to a particular conclusion, so it is much more tightly written now than it would have been if I published as I wrote.
Well, that's positive. How like lengthy are the editions of this? I mean, it's not something where like each book's 100 pages, or like are we dealing with 400 page books?
So book 1 is the shortest book, and it was 150,000 words. Yeah, book 5 was the biggest, and I think it's at 297,000 words right now, which yeah, that one could be split I'm still on the fence about splitting that one in half because I did have to use a different structure for that one than I did in the previous books, but it builds so nicely to the climax, so I'm thinking probably still be 1 book, just 1 very long book.
Is this book, obviously it's a big concept taking up multiple volumes. Is this something that you, like, have been working on, like, since your teen years? It was an idea you always had and you just felt like you had to get out there? Or did you kinda have the idea, "I'm going to be a writer," and then find the thing that you wanted to write about after the fact?